Okay, I guess we can start. Okay, hello and welcome to the panel, Data Informed Insights, In-House versus Outsourced. My name is Cetin Karakus. I'm excited to be the moderator for today's session. Here with me today, a distinguished panel of industry veterans and tech entrepreneurs. So I would like to start asking our panelists to briefly introduce themselves. Yevgeniy, let's start with you.
Thanks, Cetin. So my name is Yevgeniy Vahlis. I lead the AI group at the Bank of Montreal. Been doing that for the past about 2.5 years. Previously worked in venture capital, worked in tech and startups, and generally did a lot of random things. And excited to be here.
Peter.
Thank you for having me. My name is Peter Coleman. I'm a professor at the Courant Institute at New York University. I've been here for 14 years. I'm the director of the Mathematics and Finance Master's Program here at Courant, which is a quantitative finance program. Prior to going back to academia, I should say, I worked on the buy side. I was with Goldman Sachs, part of one of the big hedge funds there for a number of years, but I've continued my work very closely with industry. I sit on several different advisory boards today, including Betterment, the big robo-advisor, iSought, a new fintech startup, and also an alternative data company called the Alternative Data Group.
Excellent. Nate?
Hi, I'm Nate Storch. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Amenity Analytics. And our mission is to make text useful. And we've built a natural language processing platform trained on the language of finance, trained on the language of business, that we use to analyze all sorts of financial text. My background is also as an investor. I spent over 15 years as an analyst and portfolio manager before starting Amenity.
Connor?
Thanks, Cetin. Hey, everyone. Happy to be here. I lead our financial services division here at Apptopia. Apptopia is a mobile intelligence company where we provide performance data, downloads, revenue, active users for every single mobile app in the world on iOS and Google Play. Another way of saying that is any publicly listed equity that you'd be looking to trade that has a mobile app will have data on them. And I work here across all financial services, including that of purely systematic and quantitative firms, your fundamental shops, as well as your large investment banks. So we're very familiar here at Apptopia with generating signal on a public equity front by leveraging alternative data. Looking forward to the call today.
Excellent. As for me, I run the quantitative analytics solutions at BP. My background is in the financial engineering of derivatives and structured products in commodity space, where we deal with not only physical trading, but also not only financial trading, but also physical trading, where we deal with supply, demand, economics, and optimization and planning activities. So I've been involved with quantamental analytics for the last 5 years. So I'm very curious to see how my experience kind of calibrated against our panelists. So with that, we'll jump into our first topic of discussion, which I like to call as the hazards of advanced analytics democratization. So we all know that the modern AI and ML tools make it very easy to access such tools at a kind of a superficial level. However, the proper usage of such technologies for production use cases requires having a good understanding of the advanced aspects, such as being thorough testing, back testing, being aware of the parameter tolerances and hyperparameter optimizations, and etc. Yevgeniy, you've been involved in research-grade AI development at multiple large organizations. So tell us about the importance of getting like the subtle things about getting this advanced methods such as DNet right, and what will be the kind of the dangers facing organizations who take a kind of a naive approach.
Yeah, thanks. Great question, Cetin. So the one thing I would say about AI in general, and more so those more advanced techniques that you're describing, is that it's still new to the industry, even though it's everywhere in conversation, it's everywhere in product pitches, it's on every single product brochure you can find for any product out there. Still, the field itself is not embedded into the production systems, into the solutions themselves. And so, like you said, there are many options out there. There's commercial options for AI frameworks and AI toolkits. There's a very large and diverse collection of open source tools, and some are more mature than others. And you know, a lot of these products are great. They're very good at what they do, and they're very good for a specific purpose. But what I find is that in every organization, the first use cases, or the most impactful use cases that you can start from for true AI applications, right? So not kind of anything that's repurposed as AI, but really bringing the most modern, most advanced techniques to the table. Those use cases tend to require some customized approach. It's typically a combination of, you know, existing solutions, whether it's vendor driven or open source, and some in-house development. And so I'll give you one example. We launched a product called Cash Track back in October, which is now scaled up to BMO's entire online banking customer population. That's a deep learning powered product that does something very simple. It predicts when and, you know, if you're about to hit a shortfall in your checking account, right? So if you're about to run out of money, put it simply, will alert you and hopefully prevent an overdraft fee or kind of an unpleasant situation. And so that is a very basic application. We've developed a deep learning based approach to solve it. And we've leveraged the toolkits and the solutions that are out there. But in the end, we had to develop our own models, our own architectures to make it truly work with the right levels of precision and the right levels of recall that were required for a product that's facing millions of customers. So I wouldn't say it's dangers. It's really once you start pushing something towards deployment, towards productionization at a large scale, you realize that, you know, you may get lucky and there's a product out there that you can use, or you actually need the team and the skill set to develop it in-house.
Right. Nate, your company builds advanced NLP systems for enterprises. So give us some concrete examples where the sort of gotchas, you know, they will face if they instead rolled up their own NLP pipelines instead of using your solution. And how do you address such minefields in your, you know, tech offering?
Well, you know, the ability to scan through 1 million documents in under an hour sounds like an amazing superpower. And it is. You know, whether you want to improve research quality by sifting through large amounts of data or fish for meaningful insights, or whether you want to follow trends in your research corpus to improve readership and drive consumption, or create frameworks to analyze broad topics like ESG. It's all possible now, but it's just not as easy as it looks. And it's especially hard to make that leap from the lab, where something might look good, to a production level data set. And we've built our workshop platform around the core idea that we want to remove all of the friction from this process and delivering to you, our customers, the most accurate and flexible NLP models that are out there. So let's talk about a couple of the pitfalls that we see. First, measuring and verifying, proving precision and recall on a continuous basis is a big hurdle in many NLP systems, requiring the user to collect and tag statistically representative corpora for each use case and hypothesis. And the way Amenity works is that creating and updating a corpora takes no more than a couple of minutes on multiple types of documents. On top of that, within a corpus, one still needs to find and tag meaningful parts for their model. Amenity's workshop uses active learning in order to help its developers create updated tagged corpora seamlessly while developing the model. So it's not an overwhelming and blocking part of developing the solution. Second, deploying to production and running on real-time incoming documents is another huge issue that we see all the time. The move from the lab to a use case, running in production and making money is so often insurmountable. And at Amenity, we've developed a subsystem that makes it trivial to go from NLP models to creating historic and recurring flows used by analysts. It takes no more than a few hours to backfill years of data for backtesting and the recurring flows to produce new documents in real time without needing to worry about additional integrations. Our overall goal is to squeeze that creativity cycle to enable our customers to go from idea to enterprise level to production quality data set in hours or days from today, where that can take months. I've seen it take even years in certain cases. And in many, we're just constantly trying to remove the friction from that process. And even internally, our progress is pretty remarkable. We're 10x faster than where we were just 2 years ago.
Excellent. I mean, we just heard about the benefits of getting it right and how it's difficult to do that. So that kind of nudges us in the directions of the sourcing. But when it comes to the sourcing, you have different options, whether you're going to source the data, analytics, or data plus analytics. So Peter, I mean, you've been on the both sides of the fence, right? Both in academia and in industry. What will be your major?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great question. I recently co-authored a paper with G. Nexter of the Alternative Data Group called Alternative Data in Investment Management Uses, Challenges, and Valuation. If you're interested in that paper, it's available online on SSRN. We discuss these types of topics and many more, but a couple of highlights here. So first is a cost consideration, right? The cost saving of there's often cost savings associated with we're purchasing a solution from someone else. Obviously, that might obfuscate some of the machinery and mechanics that goes into the production process, but it tends to be cheaper to source things out from the outside rather than building it in-house. Another reason for to consider when one is considering in-house versus an outsourced solution is obviously what is the specialized knowledge that's needed to develop the analytics. What's the underlying technology that one needs to understand? In some cases, there are very specialized knowledge that are needed, and that is pretty expensive to build up and develop in-house. I would also add to that ingenuity. When we consider highly specialized service providers, and I work with ISOT. It's a good example of a highly specialized service provider. ISOT has teams that stay on top of the latest scientific insights and tend to integrate those ideas into their products, right? So one can expect cutting edge insights, cutting edge type of analytics. And I think a third point I would like to mention is it's also important to connect analytics to actions, right? This fits under the umbrella of actionability. Having a good interface, who's going to consume this data, who's going to consume this analytics. Traders need to be able to take action. Things need to be understood. Signals need to be able to be interpretable.
Thanks. Sorry, I lost my connection. I'm using my mobile phone. Hopefully, it'll be all right. I'll move on to Connor. Your company operates in the consumer marketing space, and you're on the supply side, and you deal with the organizational customers. So, what's your experience when it comes to the, when you deal with the customer? Do they make conscious choices about what to source, and if there are any misalignment between what you can provide and what they're willing to, what they request? How do you close those gaps?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a good one. So I think the first point that it really starts with is the organization or firm themselves. Are they relatively new to leveraging alternative data, or are they more sophisticated? The beauty about Apptopia is we support all clientele. Specifically on the financial services fronts, we're working with hedge funds or financial institutions with as little as 5 people, and couple $1 million under management, all the way up to some of the largest firms with multi-billion dollars globally. So obviously that's a very different type of partner to work with. For those that are more advanced, they absolutely are making conscious what to source decisions. They don't really have a question of what to source, more of when to source a specific type of data set. Larger firms that are extremely sophisticated, they have multi-month, potentially even multi-quarter data pipelines planned, where they know the data that's out there, and they're going to be testing all of the data sets to find what has the best signal, and if it adds enough relative signal to their existing data stack. Now, for those types of clients, and also for the unsophisticated or relatively newer clients to working with data, the beauty about Apptopia is we're extremely flexible with being able to provide the data that we have within our database. So one of the things that we do to help like work with these types of clients is after they kind of share with us what it is they're looking for, we can walk them through exactly where we think they should start on our end. Now, with the clientele that might be a little bit newer to leveraging alternative data, it's more of an educational process. So we might walk them through the types of things they can be doing with their data. So they might come to us with more of a thesis. They might say to us, hey, we're tracking these sectors, we're tracking these industries, we're looking at these companies, we're trying to figure out how to make sense of all of this. And that's very different. And what we do in that case is we'll say, hey, here's some like examples in which we found signal in the data. Here's some things that you could potentially be doing with this data, and here's how we can help you do it. And then we might show them a few paths, a few avenues that they can go down. And ultimately, based on us kind of providing them with some thoughts and getting their own creativity thinking and flowing, we can help agree upon a path that we want to take things forward on. Now, in either case, with the larger sophisticated data buyers and the relatively newer ones, the great thing is we can be extremely flexible with the data that we provide to them. We don't just have cookie cutter packages. And I think that's a major strength of ours, that we can be pretty flexible in how we're actually delivering the data to them, how we're packaging it, how we're crafting it, how we're creating it, down to the individual firm and the users themselves. And that's typically well received on both fronts. So ultimately, no matter where you are in kind of your company stage, I think it's really important to find a data provider that can be flexible to your specific needs, and one that can really work with you and also educate you on the best practices of using their own data.
Excellent. Nate, what's your experience when it comes to the misalignment between what you can provide and what customers want, and how do you persuade them?
So we proactively lean in to providing the absolute best customer experience that we possibly can. And it starts at the very beginning of an engagement, where we align and realign around those key criteria for success at the customer. And we like to identify all of the issues that we possibly can before an engagement starts. And usually, for us, that successful engagement is determined, again, at those very earliest days. And that's something that we've gotten very good at, being able to see around corners, being able to understand where those potholes might lie, so that we can do everything we can to avoid them and have successful engagements.
Right. So now that brings me to a kind of important topic, which is around the data management and data management strategy. So once you decided to kind of source new data sets, you have to have a way to manage it systematically, right? Involving things like warehousing, usage tracking, enterprise impact footprint assessment, value attribution, and costing, among other things. So Yevgeniy, so can you tell us about how do you approach this problem? For example, the data warehousing approach, does it have a huge bearing on the usage tracking or impact assessment process? And do you have any methodology for a kind of a practical costing model so you don't end up overpaying for new data sets?
Yeah, so I think everyone here knows that data management in large organizations is never have a nice and kind of neat story, right? It's always complex, and it's always a Frankenstein of different systems. Now, what I would say is when you bring in a new data set, it's a different story because you have the opportunity to do it the right way. And so within BMO, we have a strong data governance organization that has developed very good strategies around bringing in new data, managing metadata, managing access control, right, and then making sure it's all auditable and trackable. One of the challenges I think in many organizations is how do you manage access in a way that's not too restrictive, that's not prohibitive, to the point that it prevents people from innovating, but at the same time you meet your compliance and regulatory obligations, right? And so I was really impressed with the way it works within BMO, because it's actually, even though we have all the compliance and the regulatory processes in place, it's actually pretty straightforward to get access to the data that you need. And we're now developing additional technological enablers for that process. So, if you've heard of differential privacy, you may have heard about it. It's a technique for creating privacy-preserving models or privacy-preserving data sets. Essentially, it's a way to inject noise to the various kind of stages of machine learning model creation, right? It can be all the way from the data itself to the gradient descent process of training a model. And so by injecting that noise, you're providing a guarantee that no individuals will be affected, or no individual information will be leaked, whether it's through the data itself or through the trained models. So what that allows you to do is it allows you to democratize data in your organization. The processes around getting access can be much simpler when the data itself does not contain any customer information, but retains a lot of the original statistical properties. This is not in use yet, but it is one of the areas that we're working on.
And how about the costing? Like, do you overpaying is a major issue, or do you care to how much you end up paying for these new data sets?
I mean, I wouldn't say overpaying is a major issue as much, because when you have good data governance, you kind of get the reusability and kind of internal network effects within the organization, right? So you know which data is available, and you can get access to it. So you're not duplicating, data that you buy externally. And costing, usually, if you have a data set that's tied to a specific business use case, and that's our approach. Every project we have is tied to a specific use case, a specific P&L item. The data itself typically costs a fraction of the benefit you're trying to derive. Where the waste happens is if you buy data aspirationally, hoping that eventually it will be useful, and we try to avoid that.
Excellent. Peter, what major difference do you see between academic research world and the industry in this area?
Thank you. So in my role as the director of NYU's Quant Finance program, I stay very close contact with industry, looking at what the industry's needs are in terms of skills from our graduating students. And if I look back just a few years, 3-4 years or so, we've come a long way in such a short period of time. There's a tremendous amount of tools and solutions available today that weren't available three years ago. The development is just staggering and quite fascinating. The other point I'd like to add as well is there are many more use cases, right? There are many more use cases in terms of how we can leverage different data sets, what tools and techniques, what modeling approaches are useful, which ones work in certain settings, which ones may work less well in certain settings, so on and so forth. But there is a knowledge gap, and I think this speaks for the academic world. This speaks for the fact that we have something to offer, both the younger and also the more experienced student. There is a lot of interesting new research in academia, both in finance and fintech, but also in the machine learning communities that certainly is not very broadly known in industry. And some of these solutions, some of these ideas can be turned into products, can be turned into various kinds of analytical insights that can be used in production processes, and that's partly been my role in the number of advisory roles that I'm currently involved in.
Excellent. Connor, so how do you help to your customers to see the value propositions of the data sets you provide? And on more specifically, how transparent are you willing to, when it comes to, for example, to see the costing?
Yeah, absolutely. So for starters, on this point, I think there's a data provider wide kind of like legacy standard where the very easy response a lot of the time for some providers and some clients to say, hey, I'm the data provider. We just provide data. Here it is. You need to make sense of it, right? You need to figure it out. You need to figure out what to do with it. And yes, they'll answer the questions and they'll help you out. But at the end of the day, they say, hey, I'm just the data provider. You need to figure it out. And I think what we're seeing today as the competition is really heating up and that solution doesn't always work, and that's not acceptable. And data buyers are expecting more than that. And the providers that lean into it, I think, are the ones that are starting to succeed. And what we've done to lean into that is we've actually started testing our entire data set for signal and for alpha as if our clients were doing it exactly the same way. And so now what happens is, let's say we have like a hedge fund or a bank that comes to us and they share, hey, this is our coverage list. Here are the sectors, here are the companies we're tracking. We can actually turn around and say, hey, we've actually already tested these companies. We already know their signal. And here's like the correlation coefficient. Here's the R-squared values. And we can really accelerate that research process for them. And we found that this is saving them not only a lot of time, but also a lot of money as well. Because now we can point them in the right direction a lot faster, and they can go build on top of that much quicker than if they were trying to kind of go in there blind and figure out for themselves. On top of that, what we're also doing here at Apptopia to really help see the value proposition is we actually are testing the data set in different ways. So for example, we can lay out use cases where if, let's say you have like a higher frequency trading schedule, well, you might be looking to actually build like correlations against company reported KPIs. So we can support that. But let's say you have like a longer term approach. Well, in that case, we know that exists. So what we would do is we would show like some macro trend tracking capabilities that we have by building indexes and looking at sectors. So what we do is we try to think about all the different types of clients that are using our data. We test it as if they were testing it themselves. And now when new clients at those personas come to us, we've actually already done the work for them in a way. And we're turning around and actually saying, hey, if we were you looking to test our data, here's where we feel the value is. Go repurpose it for yourself. And we found that they're really willing to pay for that. And of course, that's baked into the cost, but that really has separated us from other providers in the space. On the costing front, I think this is another big thing. We put our pricing right on our website. So for a data provider, from our perspective, there's no secret in regards to the pricing. Pricing's on the website. Yes, it can move a little bit based on the size of the firm and the amount of people that get involved, but the general ballpark pricing's there up front. So there's no questions about whether or not they're going to be able to afford it or pay for it at the end of the day. They know the price going into it. The very last thing that I'll share is that we actually offer an extended trial of our data set. So some providers, what they do is they say, hey, you can only have a couple weeks to test the data. We fundamentally don't believe that's enough time to actually test the data set at scale, to know where it's going to add value. And also, equally importantly, know where it's not going to add value. So what we've done, the exact opposite. We actually offer anywhere from a 2 to a 3 month trial where the firms can literally have up to a full quarter to test our data. And so this allows them to actually have more than enough time than they actually need to work with that data. And they can really make a comfortable and confident decision on whether or not they want to be a partner at the end of the day. It really takes the guesswork out of things.
Excellent. This brings me to our final topics of discussion around the augmentation strategy. So we all know that sourcing data, external data or analytics get you only so far. You will always need, there will always some gaps between what you need and what is provided. So you need to find a way of augmenting your internal data and analytics with the external offerings. So Peter, I'll start with you. Tell us about your experience in the asset management space, where this is of a huge importance, right? Specifically, I mean, what did you do to ensure the efficient evolution of the internal data and analytics which rely on external fits subject to the kind of different change dynamics?
It goes back to basics in the sense that it's just crucial, absolutely crucial to understand your data sources and really understand what your data represents. I think that is the first and foremost. In most of the modeling efforts I have been involved in, or that I'm involved in, it's about ingesting this data into some quantitative model, whether it's fully automated or whether it's semi-automated. It's obviously critical that the model gets the right kind of data, and the data has been massaged or cleaned or prepared in the appropriate way. When it comes to models and analytics, when I worked on the buy side, I worked in places where the majority of the models and analytics, we built them in-house, also with the same philosophy that we really want to understand what is under the hood, so to speak. A couple of points that I wanted to make in terms of alternative data. I think this is becoming an ever important space now on the buy side, leveraging unique data sources to construct new signals or new alpha, and there are some core challenging in this space, such as that of ticker tagging solution, entity identification. Many of these alternative data sets, as we know them today, they are obviously biased representation of the underlying population. So being able to properly debias these data sets and stabilize these types of panels, these are basic problems in some sense, but often absolutely critical for any downstream effort.
Excellent. Yevgeniy, do you have a framework or methodology to co-evolve the external data with the internal data in a kind of efficient way? If so, what would be the major pillars for such a framework?
Yes, it really is about augmentation. As you can imagine, the bank, especially a major bank, has a variety of data sets covering businesses, individuals, industries, but there's a lot of data that just doesn't cross a bank, right? There's information about consumer preferences, there's information about traffic patterns, business activity that just doesn't cross a banking environment. And so for augmentation, and those, I can say, those were the most valuable data sets that we've acquired, were data sets that wouldn't normally cross our path, or we wouldn't be able to extrapolate them from existing bank data. Those were the data sets that were the most valuable. And my team is primarily a deep learning based team, right? So we do a limited amount of feature engineering. I mean, we do feature engineering for the purpose of making it work kind of with the software frameworks that we leverage. It's a different kind of feature engineering from more kind of traditional stats type of modeling. And so we often leverage what I would call multimodal data, which is data sets that come from a variety of sources, right? So language, time series data, images, all feeding into the same model and eventually producing an outcome. And so in terms of the strategy, it's really kind of focusing on data sets that you wouldn't be able to find elsewhere within the company. One example of that would be in the ESG space, actually. We recently announced the launch of a BMO Climate Institute that is backed by AI technology that we're developing in-house. And so within that institute, we're leveraging some publicly available LiDAR data that the government of Canada makes accessible. It's high resolution and extremely valuable. So that's just an example of augmentation.
Excellent. Nate, let me ask you, like, what you do, for example, specifically in your tech offering to smooth the kind of this mentioned coexisting of your data and analytics with the internal data the customers might have.
So, our fundamental premise is that no two customers are going to look at data exactly the same. And when it comes to natural language processing, while we offer data sets off the shelf, we also have our entire platform designed to help our investors capture their special sauce. And that really comes into being in two ways. The first is that they can run all sorts of documents through our platform, whether it's earnings calls and SEC filings and news, or whether it's internal documents. And the second thing is that they can configure the model to extract the specific information that they want to capture. The information from our off-the-shelf models is merely getting them started. It gets them 90% of the way there. And that last 10% that they can tweak enables them to really capture a whole new layer of value that's unique to them, unique to their view of the world. And by ripping out the different areas of friction that we see in that process, it enables them to create something that has the best of both worlds. It has the certain standardization around certain ways to consume all of the text, but gives them the freedom to create a unique data set that they can use for their specific use case.
Right, Connor, same questions. What do you do in your tech offering to kind of help with this cooperation or coexistence?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So for starters, on the mobile data front, our data set is extremely structured at the start, like at the base level, foundation level. And so what we do is we have the entire taxonomy of both app stores broken down to its most granular level, and also have flexed it up to its more like aggregated level. So to give an example of what this means is there's like roughly 25 categories on the iOS App Store. There's 35 categories on the Google Play App Store. Categories are things like travel, entertainment, social media, finance, right? And those can be pretty broad. And so, for example, within the finance category, let's go with travel. Within the travel category, I'll actually name some companies that exist: Uber, American Airlines, and Rosetta Stone, right? All of those are classified as travel apps. But in reality, as you just picked up on, those are three very different businesses. One was a rideshare business, one was an airlines business, and one was a language learning business, even though they're classified as travel apps per the taxonomy of the app stores. So we keep the taxonomy of the app stores intact. But what we also do is we break down the taxonomy to function-specific levels within the data set. And a function-specific level would mean rideshare, airlines, food delivery, language learning, right? All of those different types of functions for the businesses. And all of that's tagged within the data. So for anybody looking to ingest that, it's very easy to sort by those tags, by those functions, by those categories. On top of that, what we've done to make it easier to blend our data set with other data sets, which typically produces the best signal, is we've added in ticker mapping within the data set. And so, for example, now what you're able to do is you're able to pull all of the app data for any publicly listed ticker that we have mapped in our data set. And so if other data providers, or you're looking to use other data from other data providers for specific equities that you'd be looking to trade, well, now it's very easy to relate those two to one another, because now you know that if you pull Apptopia's data for Amazon, just picking a large global ticker, you know all of the app data associated with that ticker and Amazon will be associated with it very cleanly. So the ticker mapping really helps to blend the data set across other data providers' data sets. A third thing that we do after we have that core structure and that foundation in place in the ticker mapping, we make it very easy to be flexible with the client for them to ingest that data. So what this means is, for example, if we're dealing with like a very technical savvy company that might have their own kind of internal databases, maybe they're using like a local Redshift database or an Azure database. Well, one of the value props that we provide is that we can actually dump the data there. So we can be very flexible with how we deliver data to the client based on how they like to consume data. For example, we also have like out-of-the-box solutions like S3 buckets, APIs, of course. But then at the end of the day, we just want to be able to deliver data to the client in the easiest way possible for them to leverage the fastest. And so to summarize that, we're very custom and flexible to effectively go with what our client likes to use to make it easiest for them to work with the data.
Yeah, great points. Quite like the fact that you kind of provide the enable them at every step of the way. I think we can take some questions. Sorry, I mean I'm on a mobile phone, a bit away from my phone. Try to not to look too close. I seen on the chat there was a question about the ROI, if I understand it. So how you include the ROI in the data set selection process, if my understanding is correct. So maybe I'll start with Yevgeniy and then Peter. What's your experience?
Yeah, so ROI is a tricky one, right? You're trying to do that estimation before you spend the money and before you've built the solution. So I think typically for us, the ROI calculation is based on the use case, right? So we work backwards from the use case to the problems that we want, the technical questions that we want to answer, and then to the types of data that would be impactful and meaningful in terms of augmenting the performance of the solutions and the models that we build. So and then the ROI calculation becomes simple. I mean, if we know the lift that we're expecting to derive from a solution on a particular KPI, then we know what our budget should be, right? And we know kind of how far we can go, and that makes it easy to kind of assess the dataset costs. What I find though is the vast majority of the datasets that we look at cost significantly less than the benefit that we expect to derive, right? And I think that's actually a trend in the industry. I mean, that data is commoditized, and it's getting increasingly commoditized, especially in the areas where it's clearly tied to monetization, like all the different signals you can use for trading. The data there is quite costly, but at the same time, every time a new vendor pops up that provides this type of data, they take a share of the pie and the cost goes down. So I don't find that's typically the barrier for us.
Excellent. Peter, I mean, what's your experience from your asset management days, especially?
So we from my asset management days, we did most of the types of strategies we did were systematic trading, which had the standard data sources that we're so familiar with. But I can comment a little bit upon some of the findings we have recently been discussing in some of our papers on alternative data, and I want to echo what the other panelists have said here, that to date there isn't any shortcuts here in terms of valuing a potential data set. One of the costs, of course, is to take a raw data set, transform it to something that I can then evaluate and see how it will work in conjunction with the other trading signals that I have. One of the challenges with alternative data sets in general is that it tends to be hard to take this data set directly to security returns and look at how these signals correlate directly with security of returns. So it's become, in the alternative data space, it's become more of a practice today to look at how the signals correlate with operational metrics of the companies that we look at. Yeah. There's a couple of evaluation tools. I wouldn't call them metrics, but these are tools that help us move forward. One of the things that we push for quite a bit is using scorecards, using a scorecard methodology for different data sets. That's obviously very popular. And we've also involved the thinking around, we call it the golden triangle methodology. This is a form of event study type of methodology that looks at whether events in the data set correlates with real events in the world, as well as correlates with either operational metrics or security returns.
Yeah, great. I think like my experience is like, just like the adage where, you say all plans are useless, but the planning is essential. It's not about you can't really, create really accurate estimates about the costing and value, but the process of actually doing that will give you kind of a lot of ideas about what are important. Are there any other questions? I mean, I will reach to my phone. Sorry for the. So there's another question on the ROI. So with respect to ROI, what is the panel's view on the contribution of data marketplaces, for example, Quantal, Eagle Alpha, in improving ROI? Any volunteer to answer this?
Yeah, I can jump in here. So on the provider front, we of course work with a lot of these different data marketplaces. To name a few: Quandl, Eagle Alpha, FTC, where we're talking right now, right? New data, even like we can even expand it more to like Bloomberg or Amazon Data Exchange or even Snowflake. We can even expand it larger. I think the number one value prop that these data marketplaces provide is accelerating the interaction between data providers and data buyers. From our perspective, we have a pretty good understanding of who might be very good clients of our data set. We know where the signal lies, we can pull holdings, and we can know what these firms are investing in. So we have a pretty good understanding of who our top clients could be. However, though, that's great, but if they're not at the stage where they want to be purchasing data or looking at the data, that's not really that helpful, right? And so I think one of the great things about these data marketplaces is that they're bringing together buyers and sellers and facilitating those connections. They're making it very easy and in a way structured, like on a quarterly or a biannual basis, where these buyers are going to the table, going to these conferences, knowing who they want to speak to and knowing there'll be a nice organic opportunity to do so. So from a provider's perspective, I think one of the benefits to these marketplaces is connecting the right people at the right time. I think that's one of the biggest benefits there.
Excellent. Any other comments or remarks, anyone, before we close the panel?
I would agree. I would agree with Connor. I'll just add one more thing. The data marketplaces are helpful to kind of find out what's even possible from a data augmentation perspective. Right? Because I mean, again, there's a lot of different offerings. It's kind of hard to filter out the noise. No pun intended in this case, right? And some of the data marketplaces are quite useful for that, because you can see some of the comments. You can see how others have been using the data sources.
Excellent. I think with that, we come to the end of our panel. I apologize for my network connectivity problem. So been non-ideal going on the mobile, but glad that still managed to stay on the panel. I'd like to thank our panelists for their valuable contributions, and I hope that you found their insights useful.